we're moving on to immigration. So
Mhm.
immigration is a very big issue in California, especially since the media focus on ICE raids as of late. Many Californians disagree with them, but there's also a significant amount that do, who are also, some are Black and brown. What steps can you take to ensure that the rate of undocumented immigration is diminished, asylum seekers aren't put at risk, and they aren't used to undercut the pay for Californian citizens by business owners and corporations who seek to exploit the undocumented immigrants?
Yeah, I've talked about this quite a few times. The first thing, just to be clear about this, even inside the state of California, we don't have an immigration crisis. We have a racism crisis. We have a normalization of xenophobia and an environment that has been stoked by both parties, Team Blue and Team Red, the liberal and conservative wings of white supremacy, to stoke anti-immigrant sentiment and to scapegoat immigrant communities for the poverty and suffering of the working classes. In point of fact, my immigrants are a net positive to the economic environment inside the state of California, pay taxes and contribute in manifold ways to the economy of the state of California. Part of the job is literally just doing the political education, because I understand that there's quite a few that have taken that, that have been drinking that anti-immigrant Kool-Aid. It's a very old story, and jingoistic appeals to patriotism, can be activated by failed political authorities at any time to mask their manifest failures by pointing and saying it's those folks over there that are causing your poverty. But the poorest people in society are not the ones that are causing the poverty. The wealthiest people in the society are the ones that are causing the poverty.
Good to have you finally on the channel.
Good to be with you, brother. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you so very much. And, I hope you guys are staying cool out there. It has been a squelcher, especially here in Florida. Florida is basically the hot, muggy, wet cousin of California.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's one of the things that I love about Santa Barbara, is we're pretty much between 65 and 80 the whole year around. So we don't really have seasons like that. But that's guaranteed to change, since the earth is, warming at the, fastest rate in recorded history. So yeah, ecological crisis is going to turn California into Florida sooner than later if we don't act soon. So
Well, I hope not.
yeah, I've been hearing from my folk on the East Coast that y'all are getting that, good old fashioned humidity to go with the heat as well. So.
Yeah. I'm so glad I do not have a perm like some pimps back in the day, because I would come out with, bro, and tell you, you would not be able to call me a pimp lane slipback. You know what I'm saying?
I feel
you gotta say the whole thing.
I feel targeted by that just because the curls aren't holding quite as well together as today as they have on some days. But it is what it is, humidity or not. I got no excuses. But yeah, and I love the Boondocks reference right there. That's outstanding.
Yeah. Look, bro, just some activator gel and you'll be fine. Or some S curl, whichever one, the red and gold bottle.
Just let your soul glow. That's the feeling so silky smooth.
With the time when I actually was talking to my mom, and she was talking to me because I never got to meet my father, and she said, and I was like, "What did my father look like?" She goes, "Yeah, when I met him, he had a jerry curl." I'm like, "Oh Lord." So.
For the record, this is just natural curls. I've never done the jerry curl, but I've been accused of it many times. So
yeah, I probably would have had it back in the day, knowing me. Yeah, I probably would have had it.
Keep it real.
I probably would be up in here looking like Ice Cube. Anyway. So, of course, one of the things that I want to do is I want to start off, because this is a very policy-heavy conversation we're going to be having. One of my first questions in regards to your candidacy is I was looking on your website and I didn't see a policy page just yet. Yep. Is that going to be forthcoming soon?
Yeah, the policy page is actually dropping what are we today, the 24th? It'll be up probably by the end of the week, if not that by the end of the month. So
Okay.
we've got, a team of researchers that are actually working with the people that are doing the kind of cutting edge activist and legislative work inside the state of California.
Okay.
The goal behind the policy page is to not reinvent the wheel. It is to connect with the people that have been engaging with substantive change in all of the areas that are of most concern for us as a campaign. So we've got principles that we're standing on the platform, but when it comes to like the actual policies and the quickest path to policies that are actually going to ameliorate conditions for Californians, we're leaning on our allies, friends, and comrades that are actually doing the work rather than trying to reinvent the wheel ourselves. And that I will say, just with one thing on that, that's also part of an overall vision and philosophy of the campaign, is that, so my own belief is that the role of a revolutionary political party in a revolutionary social movement is that you're supposed to be able to help people move from mobilizing to organizing. You're supposed to be an instrument in the hands of people who are doing mobilization around specific issues so that you can bring together synergy and help connect folks. So we have the same approach to mutual aid and direct action that we have towards policy. We're seeking out those folks that are already doing the work on the ground. And instead of saying, hey, we have this convergence of interest, there's this thing that you're working on, and this is also part of our platform, vote for us. That's not, that's like an instrumentalist, colonialist utilization of people's organizing efforts. What I believe in personally is putting the campaign and the party in the service of the people that are actually doing the liberation work on the ground, amplifying their efforts, serving as a force multiplier, and help connecting them with other folks that are doing related work but might not be in connection.
Gotcha. Thank you so very much. So this brings me to my first question that I wanted to do regarding policy. So California was on the process of building more high-speed rail in the state, but the Trump administration had cut federal funding for the project. What ways do you intend to work around the lack of federal funding, and what about assisting local municipalities with their public transit issues?
Yeah. So what's at root of the how would I put it? You could call it a boondoggle. You could call it, stalled effort, towards transforming, the transportation environment in the state of California. The first thing is just to diagnose what's at the root of the problem before we get to the solution. What's at the root of the problem is that the Democrat establishment inside the state has put forth a bunch of different kinds of progressive programs. We'll probably also get to this when we talk about healthcare. But instead of actually implementing those in a straightforward way that's going to utilize taxpayer resources effectively, they essentially use the state till as a trough from which they hand out goodies to their developer buddies and particular contractors, so that the process is always expensive, the process is always slow, the process is always corrupt. The first part of the remedy of that is to stop treating the state budget like you're a mafia organization, and that you have a patronage network that you are trying to feed through all of your activities. And this is going to be a consistent theme with the Dems. So then how do you do this? Aside from, essentially not using this to build a political patronage network, the answer is exactly, as you suggest. First of all, to try to provide relevant resources to local communities that are doing the work, the same philosophy that's already behind the campaign. And then the second part of it, and let's just be blunt about this, is that the billionaires are going to have to pay their share. We're going to have to transform the tax environment in some fundamental ways in order to be able to get public works done of all kinds. And there's been a lot made of the fact, I've seen a number of folks saying, well, California is the fourth largest economy in the world. Technically, If the 50 states were all separate republics, California would actually be the third largest economy in the world. When it's counted as fourth, they're including the United States as as number one. If the United States was split into 50 separate states, California would be the third largest economy in the world. However, it is also the state that has the greatest wealth inequality of any of the 50 states. It surpasses even New York State in its wealth inequality. We have 186 billionaires inside the state of California, and 182,000 people sleep on the streets every night. So just by increasing state taxes by 2%, 3% on those 186 billionaires, and then by making more prudent decisions about how you marshal the state's resources, the taxpayers' resources, rather than just using it as a till from which you can hand out payouts to your buddies, you can get a lot of the work done, including reinvigorating and actually getting the process of high-speed rail. I was talking about this at an event the other day where I had to drive 5.5 hours, from Santa Barbara to NorCal, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. We need to have a train that will do this for us.
Yeah, one of the things that I think about is especially the high-speed rail in countries like Japan and China. Namely, China has thousands and thousands of miles of high-speed rail that can get you from one place to another. And I'm just thinking about high-speed rail that can go the length of California. I mean, imagine being able to get from San Francisco to Los Angeles between in 4 to 6 hours. Would you take a train that took 4 to 6 hours to get you from Los Angeles to San Francisco?
And imagine the long-term ecological ramifications of actually having, functioning, high-quality public available transportation of that kind. It is the long-term solution to the climate crisis. It's not just pulling back from fossil fuels, but let's just be clear about this. There is not enough lithium in the planet. There is not enough lithium inside the planet to create battery replacements for all of the fossil fuels that we now currently consume. And our models for storage of a lot of that battery energy, those have ecological consequences. The most fundamental intervention that we can make is to make more sane decisions about transportation. I mean, for just this is a broader kind of philosophical component of it. But if you think about the fossil fuel industry, for example, depending on which study you read, it's between 30 and 40% of the fuel is literally just used to transport fuel. You use the petroleum to transport the petroleum to other places. Insanely wasteful. We had at Moss Landing here inside the state of California a massive fire at one of these battery storage places, which is supposed to be greener energy, but no regulation of it. And so these are fires that literally cannot be extinguished with water. So you got people in Moss Landing waking up choking in the morning, a couple weeks after this. So the answer is actually in insane policy. It is insane policy. It is to be found within sane policies. We'll put it that way. And just from personal experience, I lived in France on research leave for a number of years. Even France, which is not China for sure when it comes to public transportation, you could hop on the TGV, and instead of spending 9 hours driving from Paris to Marseille, you can be there in 3.5 hours. There is no reason why we should not be able to do that to go from Sacramento to LA.
Yeah, in fact, your campaign manager, Jason Call. Hey, Jason, good to see you. He said it would take 2 hours at high speed, so even faster than what I anticipated. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. I also forgot to mention, as full disclosure, I am former co-press director for the Jill Stein Butch Ware 2024 campaign. So if anybody is wondering, yes, I was part of that campaign. Just want to have full disclosure there. But yes, that is also very impressive. I would definitely love to take that train. I don't know if you've seen videos of the high-speed rail in China, but the trains are state-of-the-art. To us, it's futuristic, but to them, it is modern.
Yeah, and I mean, it's because in contradistinction to what a lot of folks think, about Chinese socialism or the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, if you listen to like Richard Wolff, accomplished economist, talk about this, essentially half of the economy in China is, sort of driven by private market, dynamics, and the other half is planned by the state to fill in all of those gaps that individual private profit incentives will never actually fill. And you can absolutely do something like that inside the state of California with targeted interventions into things that fulfill basic needs that are associated with the public good. China has the second highest number of millionaires on the planet. You can't say that it's impossible to accumulate, personal wealth inside such a system. But what China ain't got is billionaires that bleed the people dry.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. That's one thing that we definitely also have to get on to as well. One of my next questions that I want to get to is, according to the worldpopulationreview.com, California ranks 32nd in the nation for education in 2024. What are some ways in which you will increase education standards in the state, especially for underserved areas like Isla Vita, Orange Cove, Mendota, and larger municipalities like Los Angeles County? That's the first part of my question.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll start from the top and work down, because one of the first kind of policy platform pieces that we put into place was bring back free tuition higher education in the state of California.
Sure.
It's an easy fix. It's something that the state of California had for a long time. Essentially, Reagan was responsible for getting rid of it. And at the end of this, process, we have, students accumulating massive amounts of student debt just to get through the system. It's actually like a huge break on economic development inside the state, and it's an easy fix. It's something that's incredibly popular. With respect to the way that we transform education from the ground up, let's just be clear about this. As long as our public education is directly tied to property taxes within local municipalities, the quote unquote American dream will be illusory for the overwhelming number of people that are born into low income communities. I was one of those people. My father had a sixth grade education. My mother was 15 years old, pregnant with me. They took me 45 minutes out of DC so that I could attend public schools in Silver Spring, Maryland, using a fake address, right? Yeah, and drop me off every day just so that like a minimal quality education would be something that was within reach. So as long as this is something that is strictly speaking tethered to the property tax base in particular municipalities, it is not solvable. It has to be solved with an overall state policy that is actually about orienting resources towards underserved and underprivileged communities. There have been, as we know, some extraordinary successes, especially with some Black and Latin and for that matter, indigenous charter schools in different locations. We definitely want to reinforce some of those efforts, but having robust, publicly funded public education is actually the most significant long-term investment we can make to leveling the wealth gap inside the state and to providing long-term opportunity. So that's one of the first places where that kind of redistributive function has to be at play. We have to be funneling resources to the communities because let me just be clear about this. I went to schools, I went to public school, my whole upbringing. The schools that I went to and the schools that we're sending kids to are not schools. They are built by the same people that build the private prisons. They are, you go through oftentimes metal detectors to get into them. They are boxes that produce conformity, and the school to prison pipeline is real. So one of the most fundamental interventions we can make in transforming the carceral state is to transform the educational environment.
Sure. Thank you so much. The second part of my question is about what about having a bigger push to have more vocational trade school education in the state to help build up your infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that the team is looking at, because there's actually a number of kind of proposals about how to reorient education along those lines. It's definitely something that we're looking careful at. I will say this. Um, I'm 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 optimistic, but I'm always cautious about Booker T. Washington style approaches. So, as a historian, the idea that we need, to teach underprivileged communities to be craftsmen and manual laborers, and just teach trades and skills, that can tend to reinforce some already extant class divisions inside the society. I want to make sure that people that are going to school, whether it's in Stockton, where my wife is from, or in Compton, are able to actually have access to education that allows them to maximize their human potential, not just their economic productivity. So yes, down with the program 100%. And at the same time, as a lifelong educator, I actually do believe that something is lost when we are just teaching people to work with their hands and just think about economic outcomes, and not thinking about education, as Paulo Freire put it, as a kind of pedagogy of the oppressed, as a way to teach people what liberation looks like and how to thrive in a free society.
Okay. Because one of the reasons why I asked that question is because we have a seemingly an oversaturation of college degrees, but an undersaturation of tradesmen,
Yep.
workers within this country. I also would think that there is a huge lack of women in these fields, especially when it comes to electricians, masons, carpentry, plumbing, things like that. And so I think that I'm the type of person where I think that we should do both,
Absolutely.
especially in
Yep.
regards to you can, I think there should be a basis for people, if they do want to do that, then they have that availability. But if they also want to go to a higher education or do a secondary school, like a college or university, they should have that available to them as well. To me, it's about real choice. You know what I mean? It's not about this facade of choice.
100%. And I didn't mean to downplay that. I just wanted to texture it. My father was a locksmith. My grandfather was a locksmith. So I'm not trying to denigrate manual work or anybody working with their hands. I don't think that it's an either or. I think that it's a both and. What I said was that I'm concerned when oftentimes when these are the solutions that are being proposed, it's certain people that are being channeled towards manual tasks and other people that are being channeled towards managerial tasks. But we definitely want robust options available so that people can find their place and can find meaningful work in a society.
Sure. Thank you very much for the clarification.
Mhm.
So my third question I want to get into is, so it is no secret that you support reparations for Black Americans.
Yep.
But what measures would you take as governor to ensure Black American freedmen get the debt that is owed that's not relegated to a study? What tangible material compensation would you facilitate for Black American freedmen in California? And would this include cash reparations?
Absolutely include cash reparations. Worked with LEAP and other organizations. This is actually the model for our collaboration with the activists and organizers that have been doing the work on the ground for the longest period of time. And we had them present at at one of our most recent online campaign events. So they're actually the studies have already been done inside the state of California, and I'm now just forgetting the year. It might have been 2022 or 2023 when this happened. Gavin Newsom, after a 72-0 vote to approve what is essentially a creation of a Freedmen's Bureau for the state of California, Gavin Newsom vetoed that. So this would actually be the mechanism through which reparations would be paid, which is, of course, one of the principal hindrances that usually comes up in reparations conversations, is what is the modality through which reparations would be distributed? How do you establish lineage descent and all of those things? Because it's not a racial reparations policy. You're not just handing out money to people with melanin. The idea is that you are compensating people and paying reparations for those that are descended from chattel slavery in America, and redlining and all of those other policies that have produce this massive generational wealth gap that exists, inside our communities. So you can literally do this inside the state of California just by supporting extant bills instead of being Gavin Newsom and standing in the way of this. And Gavin Newsom did what something similar to what's happened with Wes Moore in Maryland recently, which is that they're always trying to do more studies and less practical action, and it's just their way of kicking the can down the road to not actually have to face the issue. The last thing I'll say on this is that there's tangible, concrete actions that you can take inside the state of California to deliver on this measurable immediately. What you could do from the federal level, what we could have done from the White House in 24, or what a reparations-minded Green Party candidate could do from the White House in 28 or 32 is categorically different. You can erase the generational wealth gap in one generation quite easily. Reparations, a lot of people think reparations has to be paid out of the taxes that we pay, but that is pure nonsense. That would be true inside a state like California, which has a limited budget. But when you are a federal government and you print your own money, you can essentially put new money into the economy at any time. They did this with PPP, right? The biggest, COVID scam in history, in which 800 billion was handed out in loans that were then all forgiven. What that means is that they essentially printed almost $1 trillion in a year and handed it out. And 66 to 70% of that went straight to the owners of those businesses. None of that, very little of it, matriculated down to the employees who were supposed to be receiving that protection. So the point is that if you approach this as a federal solution, you can literally solve the generational wealth gap instantaneously. And people talk about 40 acres and a mule, right? That thing, and it conjures up this image of, like rectifying the wrongs of slavery immediately after emancipation and Civil War. Yeah, that would have been great. But any administration at any time can level that wealth gap and put Black folks on a level playing field. The problem is not a lack of resources, it is a lack of political will.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Wanting to move on to the next question that I have. So this one is, we're moving on to immigration. So immigration is a very big issue in California, especially since the media focus on ICE raids as of late. Many Californians disagree with them, but there's also a significant amount that do, who are also, some are Black and brown. What steps can you take to ensure that the rate of undocumented immigration is diminished, asylum seekers aren't put at risk, and they aren't used to undercut the pay for Californian citizens by business owners and corporations who seek to exploit the undocumented immigrants?
Yeah, I've talked about this quite a few times. The first thing, just to be clear about this, even inside the state of California, we don't have an immigration crisis. We have a racism crisis. We have a normalization of xenophobia and an environment that has been stoked by both parties, Team Blue and Team Red, the liberal and conservative wings of white supremacy, to stoke anti-immigrant sentiment and to scapegoat immigrant communities for the poverty and suffering of the working classes. In point of fact, my immigrants are a net positive to the economic environment inside the state of California, pay taxes and contribute in manifold ways to the economy of the state of California. Part of the job is literally just doing the political education, because I understand that there's quite a few that have taken that that have been drinking that anti-immigrant Kool-Aid. It's a very old story, and jingoistic appeals to patriotism, can be activated by failed political authorities at any time to mask their manifest failures by pointing and saying it's those folks over there that are causing your poverty. But the poorest people in society are not the ones that are causing the poverty. The wealthiest people in the society are the ones that are causing the poverty. Now, with respect to the mechanics of this, I've said many times that what you need is most folks that come want to work, and they want the freedom to go back and to visit family. And what we need to be doing is processing work permits and giving people recognized status so that they can better organize for labor organization. The reason why both parties have been in tandem on demonization of immigrants is because the demonization of immigrants performs incredibly important work for the wealthy capitalist donor class. It creates a pool of fragile laborers who can therefore be more easily exploited and worked at low wages. So by creating a system of processing people's work permits, like I can't wait as governor of the state of California to negotiate this directly with our sister Claudia Sheinbaum about how to get folks coming and working and traveling back and forth. Oftentimes this is seasonal labor that is leading to these undocumented crossings. So this is a problem that is easy to solve if your aim is to not consistently demonize immigrants and use them as scapegoats for all of the social ills that you have been unable to resolve. The last thing that I want to say on this is that, and this is again, leaning on the work of economists who are, far more accomplished than I am. Migrant labor is always beneficial to the receiving society for a very, very simple fundamental reason, is that you are acquiring people at their working age after the society that is sending them has already invested in their health care, in their education, in raising them up at ages where they were too young to work. So it's one of the reasons why Japan is drastically and radically recruiting migrant labor. Right now they're in a population decline. Migrants are beneficial to the economy, and as the Panthers like to say, what our people need is political education. We have been conditioned to think that migrants are creating the economic problem and putting strain upon our resources, when in point of fact they're actually an economic net positive for our people.
So what about the employers and the corporations that hire the exploited immigrants?
Now you're putting your finger right on it, right? Because what you're not seeing in these ICE raids is you're not seeing any white dudes being pulled out in business suits for illegally hiring a couple hundred people. Now you're not seeing that, are you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead, the people that are being targeted is the laborers. So if you actually have a robust enforcement regime that is not targeting the working class, the laboring class, but is actually targeting corporate management, which is of course what the Democrats and Republicans don't want, then this is another mechanism. And while I want to just, before we kind of move to the next topics of conversation, I want to make this extremely clear. As governor of the state of California, I will not obey any unconstitutional orders. That means that ICE, which right now is frankly largely Proud Boys and bounty hunters that have been deputized and are putting on masks and kidnapping people, that ICE is going to have to go through every law enforcement officer and every lawyer in the state of California before they touch a single hair on the head of any California resident. The job of the governor, you swear your allegiance to the Constitution, not to the sitting president. You don't swear your allegiance to your presidential aspirations the way that Gavin Newsom, has when he said that he would veto AB 15, a bill which prohibited coordination between the California Department of Corrections and ICE. These people have been facilitating this infiltration and kidnapping and the violation of all of our civil liberties because of this demonization dehumanization of immigrants, which is rooted in racism and white supremacy. And as governor, I'm stopping that. You've seen LAPD coordinating with these thugs. You've seen Santa Ana police coordinating with these thugs. You've seen throughout the state police doing exactly what the opposite of their job is. These are actually the people that you're supposed to be able to call if masked men are trying to kidnap you without any documentation.
Mm-hmm. So that is actually, I'm going to skip to this question since you brought up police and ICE as well, because I think this is also relevant to the conversation. So my next question is, we all know that the primary drivers of crime in any given area is poverty. People will commit crimes of desperation and lack of opportunity. In Los Angeles alone, you have over $2.14 billion that have been approved for the LAPD for the 2024 to 2025 fiscal year. What steps as governor would you take to reinvest that money to underserved communities in the form of housing, healthcare, education, mental health services, and infrastructure?
I'm an abolitionist. I know too much about the history of American policing for me to think that American policing can continue on these lines. And what we have seen, as you mentioned, is that in a time where Los Angeles is proclaiming a massive deficit and a budget crisis and cutting all of these fundamental and essential needs, they are nonetheless extending the budgets of the LAPD. This model cannot be sustained. We have to immediately, in the short term, start to take moves towards abolition. And that means investing in meeting people's basic needs. Right now, most of what police do, frankly, is to throw gasoline on conflicts. So much of what police are called for could better be treated with mental health professionals, with social workers, with a robust network of public safety and public health professionals. What police ought to be doing in this revised public safety environment is to be focusing on solving violent crime, which they frankly do very little of at this point in time. And we keep throwing money at policing, even though we get no concrete return on that investment. So the aim in the short term, the intermediate term, and the long term is to invest in healthcare, housing, education, mental health, all of those things that are actually productive of a healthy environment. And to be an abolitionist, in my understanding, is to be committed to a society in which all of those basic needs are met, because those are the principal drivers of crime.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So my next question is, moving on to healthcare. What specifically would be your plan to guarantee healthcare for all Californians, and how would you fund and institute housing for all?
Single payer healthcare is the easiest thing in the world to fix. It's in the state of California. Basically a state version of Medicare for all has almost passed multiple times. In fact, it did pass. The Democrats passed it when Schwarzenegger was the governor because they knew that he would veto it. So it was kind of typical performative politics of the Democrat Party. When they took power, they always end up just short of the votes that are necessary. And the word on the street is that in 2022, the last time it came up, the insiders said that the votes were actually there for single payer healthcare, and the insurance industry laid $1 million down on the Democrat Party, and the votes disappeared overnight. So just to be clear, the state of California is massively in support of single payer healthcare, universal healthcare inside the state of California. There have been numerous studies that have shown that this can not only be paid for, but actually can provide a net economic benefit that in some estimations is actually enormous. But to keep it simple, it's relatively straightforward version of it. 70 cents on every healthcare dollar that's spent inside the state of California right now is actually paid for by taxpayers. Taxpayers are subsidizing this private for-profit insurance driven system. And nationwide, and also inside the state of California, a little over 30 cents on every healthcare dollar goes literally just to that middleman rent taking insurance, quote unquote, healthcare industry, which provides neither health nor care. Quite literally, with what we currently subsidize and pay for as taxpayers inside the state of California, you could pay for universal health care inside the state just by taking that middleman group out, just by having single payer. And it would have a number of other effects that people like Pauly Song, a specialist in this domain, and others have noted. It's going to put California is this massive market, the largest population, the largest economy. California would be able to negotiate for better prices on prescription drugs. California would transform the overall healthcare environment in the country. Last part about this. Nationwide, General Motors pays more for healthcare than it pays for the steel in its cars. Think about this for a second. What would happen to commerce inside the state of California if you actually have the state providing universal health care? It's going to be a tremendous boon for commerce inside the state of California, and also especially for small businesses. It will strengthen small businesses with respect to the large corporations, because right now it is an economy of scale that allows for those large corporations to cover these healthcare costs. If you have the state providing for this basic and fundamental service, not taking profit from it, but running it at cost, then you are going to be able to actually provide a boon, especially for small businesses, but for businesses across the board.
All right. Thank you very much for that. So moving on to this, according to CARE, California gave $610 million to Israel. Would you commit to divestment from Israel for their Holocaust against the Palestinians? And would you also push for support for state divestment and sanctions against Israel?
I already have. I've made that a public statement, a public proclamation that I will provide moral, intellectual, and political leadership for state divestment from genocide. There is no reason that California taxpayers should be subsidizing apartheid or genocide. That's not how we want our dollars to be spent. And we have seen powerful examples already inside the state of California along these lines. Alameda County divested from its contracts with Caterpillar because of Caterpillar's complicity in the genocidal state. We've seen across the University of California system, either binding resolutions. In the case of UCSB, we went soft. We didn't do the binding resolution. We had a non-binding resolution, but we've seen campuses, either with student senates or faculty senates, or sometimes both, voting in favor of these divestments. This is incredibly popular throughout the state of California, and I absolutely have been campaigning on state divestment from genocide and apartheid.
Okay, thank you very much. I have two more questions. Do you have time for those?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, so one of my next question is that it's wildfire season in California, and many are still recovering from recent wildfires that have claimed homes, businesses, and countless lives of Californians. What steps would you take to combat climate change and environmental racism in the state? Some funds can be acquired through federal government assistance in this. However, the Trump administration may resist to release these funds. And what steps are you willing to take if this happens? And what alternatives to funding infrastructure would you like to take to help Californians?
So I'll try to answer this one quickly because I'm hearing in my head the question that I didn't answer from your last one. The first, which was about housing. So I do want to come back to that because my answers are actually connected. The first is that an overarching fundamental principle of environmental justice across the planet. And remember, the Green Party has stood on environmental justice, for 4 decades, since its founding. Is polluters pay. Polluters pay. You are actually supposed to pay when you create an environment that leads to environmental degradation. So the Democrat establishment in this state has simply not been willing to make its corporate donors pay, because who funds you runs you. A perfect example of this is with the wildfires that you mentioned. PG&E was responsible just in a single calendar year for over 480 wildfire incidents. And according to not just that overarching principle of polluters pay, but according to laws on the books in the state of California, they were responsible for damages for these fires that were started through their negligence. The total sum just in 1 year for those damages was $9 billion. And they were found legally responsible for that, not $9 billion. Gavin Newsom spearheaded an effort to essentially absolve that debt and put that $9 billion back onto the taxpayers inside the state of California. That's what you get when you have corrupt cronyism inside the governor's mansion rather than actual environmental accountability and responsibility. If you just enforce what's on the books and make people pay for the damage that they cause, then they're gonna get a good dose of act right. and they're you know what I'm saying when I say that. Not everybody might, but they're gonna get a good dose of act right, and they might actually start to act right. So accountability is required. And an even better example goes back to the housing question, because I answered the part about healthcare and I left out the part about housing. Well, an important part of the overall outcome of the housing mismanagement in the state of California is this massive homelessness crisis. This homelessness crisis, 25 billion spent over the last 5 years by the state of California to try to resolve the issue of homelessness. And the number of people sleeping on the streets has gone from 120,000 average per night 5 years ago to 180,000 average now. 25 billion spent over 5 years to have the problem increase on this scale. Well, why? That same cronyism. Those $25 billion have essentially been handouts to developers and to NGOs and to the poverty industrial complex, to poverty alleviation and homelessness alleviation programs, where the general executive of the NGO will write for themselves a $600,000 a year salary, from the taxpayer till to resolve the issue of homelessness. You could quite literally write personal checks of $25,000 annually to every person that slept on the streets in the state of California over these last 5 years, and it would come back cheaper than the $25 billion that we've spent. So with a small mechanism like universal basic income to help get people off the street, and with rigorous intervention into the rent hikes and the illegal rent hikes, frankly, that have been taking place inside the state of California, and also through operationalizing a model similar to what Vienna does in Europe, which is to have the state acquire housing units and to rent those at cost, which then helps bring down the overall market environment. In Vienna, 43% of the rental units are owned by the state. They're publicly owned, and that serves as a market check. So just right now inside the state of California, there are something like 20 open vacant housing units for every person that sleeps on the street. If you tax the hell out of the of people that are leaving properties sitting vacant in those ways, and then offer discounts to purchase them from the state, make that economically beneficial to the people that are trying to hold on to them, then you can literally solve the homelessness crisis, create an environment that gives better, more affordable housing options for everybody inside the state. And then just to connect the two, the healthcare, the homelessness, and then to return to the environmental justice. If you have universal healthcare that is encompassing not just of dental and vision, because there's no reason why those things should be separate from our healthcare, but also, of course, for mental health. If you have universal healthcare that is attending to people's mental health, and you have simple, common sense ways to make housing more affordable and to help subsidize the housing of the poorest in society, you can solve homelessness. You can solve it at a lot less than the $25 billion that they've been throwing at it.
Just a follow-up question to this one. Would you be in support of a housing first model, just like what they're doing in Finland?
I would have to know more about the housing first model. I have to confess, in Finland, I have to confess, but if it's anything like, the principle, everybody eats before anybody gets seconds, then I would be for it.
So the housing first model really is a model where it essentially it takes the housing of homeless that we have here in the United States and flips it completely. So you get housing regardless, no questions asked. If you're unhoused, you get housing and you're set with that housing.
Yeah.
That in turn that relieves the disease of despair within people.
Yes. Yeah.
So then they're more likely to get employment. It also helps alleviate the mental health issues because a lot of times people gain more mental health issues once they're homeless.
Yep.
Also, it helps people to be able to work through their substance abuse issues because a lot of people who are homeless get on substances after they become homeless. A lot of people
100%.
don't realize that. And so then it actually, you give them the base, which is the housing first, and then things improve from there. And so basically, it's a housing first model that has been done by Finland, and I encourage you to watch. There was a video by Second Thought by J.G. Chapman, and he actually talks about it. It's a very wonderful program that they did in Finland, which would actually help alleviate the homelessness issue in places like California.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it, and just let's juxtapose that model that you just sketched out for me, and thank you for for educating me on Finland's approach. Let's juxtapose that with the so-called solution that they have now, Section 8, which again is something that incentivizes a middleman rent-taking class that subsidizes private landlords who then price gouge, and all of this goes back to the neoliberal turn that the Democrats, took. Basically, what we've had, since Clinton is, DEI Reaganomics that trickle down. You're essentially going to say that privatization is the solution for everything. So we're going to try to find a way to have the state make things easier for private industry to regulate all of these basic needs, which is crazy because how can a for-profit group taking a cut off the top before basic human needs are met, how can that ever lead to a better solution? You're going with the same the same financial output. You're either going to end up with an inferior quality product, or you're going to have to spend more money to get the same product because you have to get that profit margin for that middleman class that's in between. They called it trickle down under Reagan. The original name for it was horse and sparrow. That's what they called it in the 19th century. You stuff a horse full of so many oats that the sparrows feed from the feces. Well, we're tired of picking through other people's feces to get our basic needs met. Housing first, healthcare first, meet people's basic needs. And again, China doesn't do everything perfect, but China has solved essentially this problem of homelessness while also maintaining a robust environment for commerce and private sector investment. It's not rocket science. You just have to not be committed to making sure that your capitalist donors eat before anybody else eats.
Of course. So now my final question that I would like to ask is California has a robust ballot initiative process. Would you, as governor, push more heavily towards direct democracy via ballot initiatives so that the people can circumvent politicians and add to their constitution themselves without the state legislators?
Yes, but I would bracket my response to that question with pointing in this moment specifically east. Big election happening today in New York City, where Zoran Mamdani has a chance to take the nomination away from the kind of capitalist Zionist candidate that's being backed by Clinton. And others. The reason why Zoran, aside from him being a competent candidate and all of those things, the reason why he's competitive is ranked choice voting. Greens have stood on ranked choice voting and on a number of mechanisms to allow for more direct representative democracy for centuries. For decades, not centuries. Greens haven't been around for centuries. And standing on those principles of actually democratizing electoral access and bringing actual representative democracy into the system, that's something that we're standing 10 toes down on in every domain. It's part of how you get us out of an environment where Team Blue and Team Red bang on on one another, and despite the fact that they have the same, corporate owners. When people have the opportunity to rank their choices, and to not have this kind of winner takes all environment obtaining in political engagement, then there can be, really powerful outcomes. And I know we're running out of time, so I just wanted to say one thing, kind of more philosophical point that I think is crucial. I don't think that people understand how close we are to actually getting this done in California. In 2022, the last gubernatorial election, only 5.5 million people voted in the primary, and the primary is the whole election. The duopoly has rigged it so that only the top two candidates advance, and that is designed to have one blue candidate and one red candidate. But in the state of California, there are as many independents as there are Republicans, which means we have an opportunity to do something extraordinary. We have an opportunity to actually take in that primary on June 2nd of 2026, that second position. And to get to that second position, in 2022 only took 1.3 million votes. 17% of the electorate voting for a Republican candidate got that candidate to second place. If you get me 1.5 million, 1.7 million votes on June 2nd of 2026, then we can bring this progressive populist people's agenda, and they will have to prosecute the case, and they will not be able to hide. From June until November, they are going to have to hear from us, bringing these issues that are of pivotal concern, that are central to like the dignity and humanity and existence and survival and thriving of so many Californians, but who are not being served by a democratic establishment that has become corrupted. We actually have an incredible opportunity to do this. This isn't pie in the sky. This isn't theoretical. We have an extraordinary opportunity that mirrors the opportunity that New York City, has potentially, today, which is to introduce, some fundamentals of anti-capitalist principles and socialist policies in order to actually meet people's basic needs. We have an opportunity for political revolution.
All right. Thank you so very much. So that's my questions that I have for you. I would like to ask more, but unfortunately, due to the sake of time, you've been more than generous with your time. So I just wanted to say I appreciate it. If you can let people know where they can find you and what they can, where they can find your campaign as well.
Yeah, so it's just at Butch Ware on all of the social media platforms, and then go to butchware4gov.com, BUTCHWARE, the number 4GOV. That's our website. You can also check out, you'll see this from the website, the Revolutionary Learning Community. It's our own social media platform that is not owned by Meta. It's not owned by Twitter. It's a place where it's secure and you can interact. There's a actual link there. There you will find mutual aid and direct action. I'm somebody that believes that electoral politics are just part of an overall liberation strategy that also requires mutual aid, direct action, and organizing. I said that at the outset. So this is not just a political campaign. This is a political and social movement.
All right. Thank you so very much. And just to let everybody know, the link is also in the description down below to Butch Ware's campaign as well. Thank you so very much, Dr. Ware. It is such a great time to have you. And thank you very much for answering all my questions.
Appreciate you, brother. All right. Take care. Be well.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so very much for watching my channel. And I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content, that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.